second. Okay, so good evening, everybody, and I'd like to welcome you all to the LGFA Mental Toolkit for Success webinar. We're really delighted to have Dr. Ciara Losty on with us tonight. Ciara has a huge background and lots of experience that she's going to share with us this evening, and we're very lucky to have her on board. Ciara is a lecturer in sport and exercise psychology in WIT there in Waterford, where she's based. But as well as that, she has been the sports psychologist with Team Ireland in the sports science and medical team, and she was there in Tokyo, she's very lucky, in 2021 and London 2012. And currently in her role, she is a transitionist psychologist for Team Ireland. So basically she's helping the athletes adopt as they come back. So her experience is through the roof, and we're really looking forward to hearing from her this evening. And I'm going to hand it over to Ciara, as she's the expert, and hopefully everybody gets a lot out of it this evening. I'm really looking forward to a great evening. Ciara, over to you.
Thanks a million, Claire. Thanks for that lovely introduction. So who am I? I'm a practical and practicing academic, and I call myself a pracademic. I fit into that space. So my day job is in WIT. I run the Masters in Sport and Exercise Psychology there. I'm just back from Tokyo, and I'm working on the transition program for the Olympic and Paralympic athletes. So my role there was to support them and actually transitioning back to Ireland and transitioning on to maybe it's retirement, or maybe it's they're continuing on to Paris for the next cycle. And I was also there on the ground supporting the equestrian teams at the actual Tokyo Games. I also work, there's a lot of horses featured in my life at the moment, all licensed and professional jockeys in the country. I also work with GAA teams or any kind of individuals. I don't really specialize in any particular sport. I just specialize in working with the people. And sports people continuously face tough times, but develop key strategies, or I suppose tools in their mental toolbox to overcome adversities. And I suppose tonight I really want to highlight some of the strategies that sports people use, which really can be applied in your sport. But I think there's some takeaway messages here tonight that you can apply in your everyday life as well. So the key topics we're going to cover and we're going to look at your own self-talk, your own narrative, how you actually speak and talk to yourself, what type of language do you use, and just challenging some of those, your thinking and your thoughts. This idea of pursuing excellence, and pursuing excellence really for me is, it doesn't matter what level you're at, it's pursuing excellence at the level that you're at and comparing your own performance to yourself. What is this growing and cultivating a growth mindset? So I'm going to touch on that. And again, I'm hoping to give you some skills and tools for your mental toolbox. So we're coming through a real period of uncertainty, and there's some simple self-talk strategies. And self-talk just means your internal dialogue, what you say to yourself, the language that you use. Is it positive? Is it negative? Is it neutral? And a lot of us have experienced or do experience anxiety, and we face some difficult emotions. And particularly when things are a little bit uncertain, and they have been for the last while, that uncertainty is like a fertilizer for anxiety. So we've had to face and kind of think about our thinking, or what we call our micro cognitions, that it's helpful to become aware of the way we're thinking. And if we're a little bit aware of the way we're thinking, we can actually change the way we're thinking and make sure that our thinking and our thoughts are working for us, not against us. So some of the tools that we'll talk about tonight is about focusing on what you can control. And yeah, you've definitely probably heard that one before. But the next piece of the sentence that sometimes we don't kind of, we need to remind ourselves of is focus on what you can control, but remind yourself that you can cope with the rest of the things that you cannot control. And what does that actually look like in a real life kind of practical example? And we called it useful and helpful thinking in psychology. Our analogy that we actually used with our Olympic athletes was when things were so uncertain, was just to run the mile that we're in at this particular time. So not thinking about the past, or not being overly focused on the present, just being aware of where we are and being in the present moment, that running the mile that we're in, and focusing on the controllables. Because an awful lot of our energy is sometimes spent thinking about these things that are in this red. So whether it's time, COVID, government decisions, cancellation of matches, lockdowns, actions of others, weathers, all of these things sometimes affect how we feel and how we think about certain things. We have absolutely no control over any of these things, but we can control our responses to these things that are actually in this green zone. We've a little bit of influence over things that are in the amber zone. So we can't control others, but we can certainly maybe feed our energy to somebody in a positive way, and that we make them feel good about themselves. And we can kind of give off our energy to other people or other players or other teammates that they feed off this. But essence, we can influence what's in this amber circle, not necessarily fully control. And what we do have complete control over are all these things that are in this green zone. So your sleep, your nutrition, your training, your lifestyle, your routines and your preparation strategies, your mindset and the type of mindset that you choose to bring to training, to competitions, just to your everyday life, your attitude, your choices, your attention or where you place your attention, and your responses. And our responses, particularly when I'm talking about responses, I mean responses to challenging situations. So focusing on the controllables, which are all of these things in the green, and reminding and remembering that we can focus on these things, but we can cope with everything else that's outside of that green zone. And actually ask yourself, if you're in a challenging situation, is this something I can control? Put it into these different color zones. And if it's something you cannot control, you either have to roll with it, you have to change your response to it, or you have to pick your battles. And again, to remember, the goal isn't to get rid of all your negative thoughts and your feelings, because that's kind of impossible. The goal is to change your responses to them and make sure that your thoughts are working for you as opposed to against you. And remember that you are not your thoughts. Thoughts are not actually real. You're just making them up in your own head. But just because you think something doesn't mean that it's actually real. It may feel real because you keep repeating that particular message to yourself, but it's not real. It's only a thought. So let's look at some kind of basic strategies about how to actually manage your thoughts and your actual feelings. Because your thoughts impact your body and your emotions. So they really impact everything you do. So it's vital that we start thinking usefully about our thoughts. You have about 50 to 80,000 thoughts per day. So some of us have even higher internal dialogues. We're talking to ourselves all the time during the day. Even when we're engaged in some other tasks, we're still talking to ourselves, which means you have about 35 to 48 thoughts per minute per person. That's a lot of mental congestion and an awful lot of mental traffic. And what sometimes we need to ask ourselves about, how do we need to actually think or feel or behave to achieve our goals in training or our goals in competition or our goals in life? How do we need to feel and behave and think to make those goals a reality? And I sometimes use this in a simple strategy with the athletes that I work with, the 4Ds. It isn't something very complex or fancy, but it is something kind of useful and sits in that useful and helpful strategy, that your daily decisions determine your destiny. That it's the small things and the small attention to details and the small accumulation of those little milestones or those little goals that you achieve every day will determine your destiny. The people who make it to the top, and it's taken them, when I look at the Olympians, they were on a 5-year cycle to get ready for a particular an Olympic competition. So they had to really bring it back to those small daily decisions that determined their destiny. So just to think about, if you can remember again one thing or take away one thing from tonight, that your thinking affects your emotions, which affects your actions. Cup of tea. So your thinking affects your emotions, which affect your actions. So if I'm going to think negative thoughts or negative statements, I'm going to probably feel my emotions are probably going to have low energy. I'm maybe going to have negative emotions. I might feel sad. I might feel down. My confidence could be low. And that might affect my actions. I put in very low effort in maybe the drills or the skills, or I maybe avoid some kind of challenging situations because I feel I'm not going to be successful in them. And it also works the other way. So sometimes we think we need to actually think a certain way to influence our actions or behaviors, but also our actions, or a cup of tea backwards, affect our emotions, which affect our thinking. So sometimes we get kind of caught in this kind of thinking loop or cognitive distortion about something, where in fact we should maybe put our energies into changing our behavior and changing our actions. So if I act more confidently, just like you say, if you were going into an interview type of situation where you're going to present or try to present the best version of yourself, where if you act calm and act more confidently, that will actually affect your emotions. So you feel the anxiety comes down a little bit and your thinking becomes a little bit more clear and calm. So sometimes we don't need to just think ourselves into situations. We can often act ourselves into certain situations. And that's something I see a lot with GAA players, that they could be anxious before they get to the big game or the big competition. But if we actually implement some simple types of acting type strategies or behaviors or preparations that they feel and routines that they feel comfortable with, that just actually calms them, and because they're familiar as well. So our thinking affects our emotions, but our affects our actions. So I want to ask you, like, what stories are you telling yourself every day? Because everybody struggles sometimes with thinking or talking negatively to themselves. But if you're constantly speaking to yourself in a very negative manner, this can really take a toll on your mental health, or can maybe increase your stress levels, or further even can maybe depression or anxiety. And particularly if we leave these automatic thoughts or automatic negative thoughts, they're called ants from a CBT perspective, they may actually become entrenched and may negatively influence our rational, logical ways in the way we think and the way we actually make decisions. So I'd love you to think about, what words are you using in your mind? What are the kind of, can you catch even those particular statements that you say to yourself, or write down those repeated negative statements? And could you capture them in some way? And when you actually see it on paper, it's a little bit more easier to challenge your thinking and your thoughts. Because remember, like I said, just because you're thinking something doesn't mean it's real. It's only a thought. It's only real if you act on that or you behave in that in a certain way. So a basic baseline question is that your thinking needs to be useful and helpful. So using it, reframing that as a question, asking yourself, is this a useful or helpful thought right now? Is this actually helping me right now? Buys it a couple of seconds, that 30 seconds, that minute, to be able to change your thinking and thought. You don't have to accept it, you can change it. And remember, bring it back to that very, very basic focus on what you can control. Remember what's in the green zone, and remember that you can cope with the rest. But integrating these basic management of thinking and feeling into everyday tasks is really important. And probably one of the best examples, and something I have to use myself, is even saying to myself, if I'm stuck in a traffic jam and I'm getting all angry and I'm getting all flustered, can I control it? No. But can I cope with it? Absolutely yes. So what can I do? I roll with it, because I just have to pick my battles. I need to save my energy for something else. So integrating these strategies just into every simple day task will mean that they become embedded, and they become part of, I suppose, to your unconscious part of your mind. So that when you are in that stressful or, I suppose, challenging situation, that you can draw on some of these basic simple strategies about being aware of your thinking, your emotions, which will actually influence your actions or your cup of tea backward if necessary. So I just thought this was a really nice analogy of to summarize in relation to your useful and helpful thoughts. You will never speak to anyone more than you speak to yourself in your head. So be kind to yourself, because some of the things that we say to ourselves in our own mind, that if somebody was actually, you met somebody in the street and they walked past you and they said that to you, you become either incredibly upset or you could possibly punch them. Okay. So be kind to ourselves, or ask yourself, is that a kind thought? Is that a useful thought right now? Is this actually helping me right now? Or am I actually putting more fuel on the fire? So again, going back to challenging and using questions to reframe your self-talk is a really simple strategy. Or asking yourself, is there a different way to view this thought or situation? Another type of question to kind of provoke a little bit of reflection again, and managing your thinking and your thoughts. So again, going back to this useful and helpful thinking, what can help? Become aware of your thoughts and the language that you use. So think about your thinking a little bit more. So I'm not actually asking you to think more. I'm actually asking you to think about your thinking. What is your thinking style? How effective was your thinking there? Like, what thoughts actually helped you, or what thoughts didn't actually help you? If you have a little bit of awareness about that, you can actually act on them and change them. And it's sometimes, like I said earlier, it's a little bit difficult to just think about these things, capture them and write them down, or um, that's why people sometimes they find journaling uh, a useful tool as well, because you can capture and challenge some of these thoughts. And again, acknowledge what you can and what you cannot control. How can you learn to adapt and accept the uncontrollable? Because again, this is about giving energy to the things that you cannot control and accepting the things that you cannot control and directing your energies at the right thing at the right time as well. And this can allow for unhelpful patterns to be explicitly changed, and we can develop more helpful patterns. And again, what we might need is to actually voice or share your thoughts or concerns with someone you trust, to actually have this conversation with somebody and go, look, I keep thinking about these things. What do you think about it? And when you actually articulate it out, you either sometimes find yourself laughing at some of the things you're probably saying to yourselves, or it gives you a space where someone can actually hold up a mirror and challenge your actual thinking and thoughts. And that's what I find, I suppose, within my applied sports psychology work, in that we allow the athletes to come in to a safe space where they can be themselves, where there is no judgment, and they can present their athletic self, and they can present their real self to somebody that has no skin in the game, who isn't going to pick or choose them or put them on the team at the weekend. So they're allowed kind of a safe space to actually articulate some of this useful and helpful thinking, or unhelpful thinking or thoughts. So we need to find solutions. And why does that actually matter? So the more time we spend focusing on why something happened and whose fault that thing actually happened, the further away we are from actually finding a solution to what we find, to what we want. And the more hardship we're going to endure in that kind of ping pong in our own mind. So instead of focusing on why did something happen, instead expect problems, or expect barriers to what we want to achieve, or expect barriers to our goal, and ask, instead of asking the why me questions, ask, well, why did that actually occur? Or what strategy could I use to actually overcome that barrier? And we sometimes call this in sports psychology the what if type scenarios, where we expect all these situations and scenarios. And probably my Olympic experience probably presented me with one of the most demanding and complex experience, where we had hundreds of what if this happens, what if someone tests positive, what if this person goes into isolation, what if the coach is feeling ill on the day, what if one of your teammates is feeling ill on the day, what if. And that's not negative thinking, that's actually practical positive thinking. It's going through all the particular situation and scenarios and finding solutions in advance of these things actually happening. So when you actually, if these things or these problems do occur, you're not in the why me type loop. You're in the, okay, now I know what I need to actually do. So finding good solutions is really important. And again, as well as expect problems, good solution finders do not take setbacks personally. And that kind of links into what we're going to do later, is the growth mindset thing, that everything is just a challenge, and kind of framing these things as a challenge, as opposed to a threat to you personally. Setbacks and problems happen to everybody. It's how certain people respond to certain things makes the difference. And there's a big difference between failing and being a failure. So how we articulate things, if it didn't even work for us, will affect our future motivation and our confidence levels. Failing is information. Failing is data. If I'm going to use a strength and conditioning example, it's actually, we say to people, you lift to failure, and that's a positive thing. You've actually maxed out something. So failing isn't an end point. It's just a pause. It's a comma. It's what we do next is really important with it. So be flexible and open in your approach to certain things and the challenges that we're going to face, because we're going to face challenges, whether it's COVID, whatever happens in the future, matches, opponents, there will always be challenges. But it's our responses that we have complete control over to those particular challenges that we face. Just thought this is a really interesting quote as well. You just have to be prepared for everything, make some adaptations and get on with it. Because if you don't get on with it, there's not much else you can do. We have no say in the matter. And they're pretty successful, the pretty successful Rowan brothers. So finding solutions. So you always have options, including the option to do nothing. Maybe you don't need to do anything. Okay, maybe you don't need to give your energies to somebody. Maybe you just sit back and you let the situation play out. So what can help? So you need to practice a range of ways to look at particular problems and seek solutions. Or another way of looking at things, ask yourself is, what would a friend or colleague do in this particular situation? So look at it like nearly like a third party. What do you think my friend would say? What would my coach say? not just what do I think I need to do. Ask yourself, is there any evidence to support a particular course of action? What's the data? What's the evidence? So taking the emotions out of a certain things. And are there advantages or disadvantages with a particular course that you choose in the short or long terms? You could always practice spotting options and opportunities and become better at problem solving. This is something we can all learn to do better as well. But by creating a large menu, I like this idea of options before deciding on the best one is helpful in finding effective solutions. So if you're working through a particular issue, write down as many solutions as you can. And I just wanted to draw, like, even the Heinz, and the tomato ketchup, we never really look at the detail, but when you actually go in and you look at if you want to take your Heinz tomato ketchup after this and look at the label, there's 57 varieties of Heinz ketchup. So there's always something else. There is always a different solution. There's always a different perspective. So go through that menu and capture that and write it down. Weigh up the pros and cons of certain things before you jump on that effective solution. But at least now you've given it some thought about from the what if scenario type perspective. So good problem solvers use a combination of intuition and logic to come up with their solutions as well. And they use as much information as they possibly can to come up with the best possible solution. And it's important, again, not to create problems for other people as well by just trying to solve your problem, by passing the problem on to somebody else, particularly in a team sport such as yourselves. So to solve the problem, we can't create more. So this requires self-discipline and focused to make sure that we become and work on an effective problem solver. And if we work on this skill, it will help us become better equipped to cope and thrive with the challenges that we face. Okay, and this is just something I wanted to bring up, and I love this particular analogy, because we probably think a little bit more. Sometimes some of us pay more attention to the battery in our phones than we do to the battery in our own bodies and our own self. And this kind of idea of self-care, that self-care is a priority. It's not a luxury. And particularly for athletes, it's something I see that athletes and players generally struggle with, that they feel like everything sometimes they have to do has to be to maybe better their performance or make them a better player. But not necessarily, particularly for people who are active, the default can be to do more and more and more. And we know in sport that more and more is not necessarily better, that rest and recharge and recuperation and quality rest and quality recuperation is just as important as training days. And what you will always find, and this is probably something when you come home from work, if you have a family, and it's difficult to manage your thoughts, your energy, your anger, even when you're tired and you're fatigued. You know how irritable you can be when you're actually very tired. So we need to pay more attention to ourselves and to our own self-care strategies, and whatever the simple things that actually might be able to recharge you are really important. And I just explore in different ways. And I suppose COVID has taught us different things. So we're so keen to move on from COVID, but there's probably some little nuggets in there that we need to keep, that we probably learned different things, or maybe found out different walks, different runs, different exercises, different activities we engaged in that actually helped us boost our own mood, our own self-esteem. So holding on to those and not be so keen to get rid of some of those things that we learned during COVID, but exploring different ways to help you recharge is essential. And again, as humans, we're really kind of creatures of habit. We stick to the same things and we do the same things a lot, but maybe there's something else or something unique or something new that you might actually help you staying recharged or get you recharged. And I mean by recharging, it's not it's letting your mind rest. It's doing something, being in the flow of it. It's not really lying off the couch scrolling through the phone or the tablet. You're not actually even letting your brain rest, or it could be just sitting off watching a movie. Phones are away, that you're actually immersed in the program that you're watching, the film, the box set, whatever it is, but you're just relaxed and you're in that particular moment, because this will help us stay balanced. So identifying social, mental, physical, or any kind of recreational activities that will help you stay balanced. Or maybe you need a little bit of boost. Okay, what would you put into your boost box? What would actually recharge you in some way? For me, it's simple stretching, it's going for a walk, it's going for a run, it's a trashy book, It's nothing academic, so I could just lose my mind in it, or it's podcasts. That's what I find are the things that boost and recharge me. And you should have something similar, not my activities, but that you should be aware of what activities are good to actually get that recharge and refresh. Because I want you, and I suppose, to really think about this striving and staying balanced to make sure you're in a place and a continuum, that you're in this kind of thriving place. And it's nice to conceptualize your self-talk and how you feel and managing your self-care in this kind of continuum, that maybe you sometimes do struggle, but then you can actually thrive at certain times as well. We're never one or the other. We're just moving and shifting based on maybe the different challenges that we're facing in our life at a particular time. But if we're in this, at least in this thriving space, it leaves us space to excel, to move into this particular space. So if you're thriving, you're positive, you're calm, you're performing, you're sleeping well, you're eating normally, and you're engaged in normal social type activities. But again, it leaves us that space to move. So staying balanced, and that self-care piece is incredibly important, and one lesson I'd love us to all keep from COVID. Okay, so that's kind of the first section kind of done in relation to managing your self-talk, managing your self-care, and thinking about your thinking and your thoughts, and making sure that they're working for you, not against you. The second bit I want to talk about then is really pursuing excellence, and how we pursue excellence, and some basic kind of strategies or lessons that we can take forward with us. And it really never gets easier, no matter even if you're at the top of your sport or you're a minor player, it still doesn't get easier, because you shift the goalposts as a human. You just begin to perform better and you shift the goalposts out another little bit. So always look for areas of improvement unless you consider yourself to be the finished product. And I would see them, and I have been around Olympians, and they still don't consider themselves the finished product. None of us are ever the finished product. It's that striving for excellence. Now, I'm not talking about perfection here, it's the pursuit of excellence. So you could be an underage player, a minor player. It's just you comparing yourself. So your baseline, where you are, where you have been to where you are now, is incredibly important. And once you get to another level, it's again getting into that challenge mindset and pushing out the goalposts another little bit. But it doesn't get easier. Or you kind of feel that maybe it should get easier. No, it never gets easier. You just perform better and you move on and you stretch and you grow as well. And love the sport you're with. The grass will always be greener. And maybe you're from a small club or a small community, but that certainly doesn't mean lesser than another one. And you may have lesser kind of maybe facilities in some way, but you have to learn to love the conditions you're in, because that's the club, that's your heritage, that's your community, that's your culture, that's where you come from. And that really is important. And our tendency as humans to assume is to look at what others have and go, yeah, but they have this or they have that, and we don't have this, or they have better floodlights, or geez, they're after building, new AstroTurf pitch, whatever it is. It doesn't matter. We are where we are, and love the conditions where we're in, because that's where we are. And the most amazing high performing athletes have come from the most humble of background. It doesn't matter about those things. It matters about the attitude that you turn up with. And again, I think small is bespoke. It's certainly not lesser than. I think when you're smaller, sometimes you actually have a little bit more autonomy and you get a little bit more direction and a stronger sense of community and bond than maybe some of the bigger clubs actually do as well. So love the sport and love the club that you're with. This might sound really simple, but be boring, be basic, but get great at the basics. Team building activities have nothing to do with performance. They're nice, they're fun, they're entertaining. But if you want entertainment, look at Netflix, go to the cinema. Get really good at getting the basics. And that's what I see the people who make it to the top of. Maybe they have great technical and tactical ability, but they are superb at practicing, going over those very, very basics again and again and again. But they're also great at the other basics as well. Their mentality, their mindset, their energy levels, the fuel they use, their recovery, the sleep, the attitude, and also something for any players on the line. How coachable are you as a player? How easy are you to actually coach? So get great at the basics, and then look at the other basics that are outside the technical and tactical abilities. And once you get them right, it mightn't sound fancy, it might sound a little bit boring, but it's a solid foundation. And that's for anybody at any level within a sport. Just something to think about then is relentless positivity is silly and annoying as well. And it may work for you, and that's absolutely fine. But what I find for people is that sometimes different thinking styles work for different people. And maybe negative thinking works for you, but it doesn't work for others. And that's absolutely fine. The only thing that matters is whether your thinking drives helpful action and performance. All of the other stuff is not important. So what works for one is not going to work for another. Do you really want the person who maintains the next airplane you fly to be on to be a relentless positive thinker? I certainly don't. I want practical thinking. The more practical we are in our thinking, the more positive it actually will be. Or even the more neutral we are in our thinking, the more practical positive it will be in the future. So you don't need to be positive all of the time, but we can certainly be a little bit more practical in how we approach and how we choose to think and feel, like I said, in these challenging situations. And something I suppose I've noticed more and more with players, uh, with athletes, is I suppose your use of media and social media as well. Like how much do you engage with media and how much do you engage with social media is completely in your control. And some people are, which we're finding out through research, are a little bit more social media sensitive in that what you read will actually affect you, your maybe your identity, your confidence levels, how you feel about yourself. And then another player could read something and it just rolls off their back. It doesn't bother them in the slightest. But it isn't like that for everybody. So I suppose it's easy for me to say you have a choice and you need to maybe unplug from everything, and that probably isn't a realistic strategy for some people. They need it, they like it, and younger people have grown up with it and they like to use social media. But certainly unfollow accounts that make you feel anyway anxious, stressed, frustrated, or angry. It's your choice to not follow those. Get rid of them. If they're not working for you, time for them to go as well. Follow accounts that make you feel good or take your mind off what's going on around you, or you find it interesting, or you think it's facilitative to your performance. Absolutely follow those accounts. Avoid reading an article if it makes you feel upset, angry, stressed, or under pressure. And that can be even particularly leading up to game like situations or scenarios. It might not be helpful to be reading papers, local papers, that type of thing. You get a choice to tune out of those things. If social media is very stressful, you can even create a Finsta account. And this is what some of our Olympic athletes do. So they only follow certain accounts and leave the posting on the pages until they're ready to do so. So they actually only follow certain ones and leave their own personal ones. Don't delete them, but they leave them there until they feel better and more ready to engage with those particular ones. So again, take control and make sure that your social you're using your social media, that you're not being used by the social media accounts, that you have control over these things, and make sure again, like I said, they're working for you, not actually against you. Okay, so this is a really interesting contemporary example about, I want you to think about, I suppose, even from a coaching perspective or from a player perspective, that you are not your results. So separating and developing your identity outside of your sport is really important because it'll actually give you longevity as a player. You are more than your sport and you are more than your result. And that's not to say if you're coming up to a big game, you get to championship time, championship final, that these things are not going to be consuming. Yes, they are for that particular time. But after that, it's time to move on or develop your identity or develop a transition plan in a different area. So I just found this example of Nicola McDermott really interesting, and her applied strategy that she actually used. And I was really lucky to actually see her in Tokyo. So after every high jump that she does, she comes back and she writes in her notebook. So you can actually see her here now. This is her in Tokyo, writing away here in her little notebook. And the camera will actually go up to her and go straight in her face and watch what she's doing. So what does she write? So after the game, she came out and she told everybody what she was doing. So she ranks herself in different aspects of her jump. So she gives herself a mark out of 10 for maybe her run up, her take off, and then she chooses one area to focus on for the next thing. Okay, so now she's taken all of the emotion out of it. She's just going back to, I suppose, she's not just leaving her thinking and her thoughts to chance either. She's capturing them, she's writing them down, and she's also, what's really important, telling herself what she wants to do, not what she doesn't want to do. So she's given herself kind of positive instructional actions on things that she can improve on and things that she needs to do for the next jump. So which allows her to leave what she's done in the past and focus then on the present, the next jump. So it was amazing watching her in actual action. She went on then, she won the actual silver medal. And just some kind of things that she came out with afterwards. Just the statements, I do sport, but it's not who I am. So it's part of who she is, but it's not all of who she is. Okay, now it's an important part of who she is, but it's part of our identity, but it's not all of who we are. And developing a unidimensional identity means that we are actually more likely to burn out, okay, and we'll have less, I suppose, shorten our careers then, okay. So the more identities that we can actually develop, so you have your football self, your academic self, your school self, your coaching self, your family self, your friend self. That's a really healthy approach to life and to actually your actual football as well. And this really is what we're going to talk about in a few minutes, this growth mindset in action. So the rating system is objective rather than subjective. So it helps kind of her detach the emotion from what she's doing, and it focuses on the action. So now we're going back to our actions affect her emotions, which affect her thinking. And it tells her what she needs to do next. So this is how she's actually implementing these basic thinking strategies in action for herself. And she doesn't change. No matter what's happening, she'd actually won the silver medal in Tokyo. She still sat down. There was tears. It was really emotional watching her. Tears rolling down her face. She was absolutely delighted. She busted all the Australian records to win the medal as well. And she still completed it and stuck to her own particular routine, even in that high performance, high pressure type situation when the world was looking. So just an interesting example of high performance sports psychology, and something we can all learn from, about detaching our emotion from our sport, and that we are not our sport. We are more than our sport. It's a big part of who we are, but it's not all of who we are. Okay, I'm just going to shift on to this growth mindset and fixed mindset piece now, because I've touched on that now a couple of times, and explain it a little bit more and a little bit more in depth. So we're going to have a little short video here to explain it for you. Hopefully this should just click.
Researcher and professor Carol Dweck uses the term mindset to describe the way people think about ability and talent. Dweck delineates between two different mindsets that exist on a continuum. The first is the fixed mindset, which suggests that your abilities are innate and unchangeable. The second is a growth mindset, which views it as something you can improve through practice. In a fixed mindset, you view failure as permanent, but with a growth mindset, you see failure as a chance to learn and even pivot. Those with a fixed mindset are more likely to view critical feedback as a personal attack, while those with a growth mindset will see it as a chance to improve, where they can develop new systems. With a fixed mindset, you're more likely to choose easier tasks and put in minimal effort. After all, if talent is fixed, why bother improving? Why even try? But with a growth mindset, you're more likely to embrace challenging tasks and work hard to improve. Those with a fixed mindset are likely to give up when they face an obstacle. Meanwhile, those with a growth mindset will view obstacles as a chance to experiment and solve problems. In a fixed mindset, the focus is on measurable accomplishments. But with a growth mindset, the focus is more on a journey of continual improvement. With a fixed mindset, you're less likely to take creative risks. But with a growth mindset, creative risks are simply a way to innovate and improve. Ultimately, your mindset influences everything from creative risk-taking to how you view feedback to whether or not you finish difficult tasks. And in the end, it's one of the greatest factors in determining whether or not you grow and improve in your abilities.
Okay, so just a really simple introduction to growth mindset and fixed mindset. So just knowing the distinction between the growth and fixed mindset gives you a new choice and about how you actually approach challenges. Now, with the little piece that's missing on that video is that it's not that we have fixed or growth. We generally have, or everybody really is, a mixture of fixed and growth mindsets. So you could probably have a predominant growth mindset in one area, but there can be still things that might trigger you into fixed mindset in another particular area. So you maybe have a good growth mindset in relation to your football or your coaching, but you might have a very fixed mindset when it's in relation to something academic in school or college or a new challenge or learning how to use something on a laptop. So we switch between these mindsets based on the challenges that we actually face. So that's just an important distinction to know as well. But growth mindset is freedom, it's perseverance in the face of failure. You know that effort is required to build new skills, and you actually find inspiration in other people's successes. And it's again embracing the challenges and stepping out of this comfort zone. Accept criticism and see it as feedback. And there's a real desire to learn when we approach something from a growth mindset perspective. If we're in this fixed mindset, we're very limited. We avoid challenges. We mightn't actually go into that learning zone at all to even put ourselves forward for a particular challenge. Give up easily, so the effort is generally low. We feel threatened by other people's successes and don't celebrate other people's successes. We want to look smart at all costs, which means that sometimes we take shortcuts in relation to certain things. Feel that effort is fruitless, that maybe I have no control over the outcome, and ignore feedback or take it as a personal criticism when I get actual feedback. What mindset do you have in relation to certain things? So it'd be interesting if you can just reflect there when you're faced with challenges or certain things. Which do you switch? Are you sitting in the growth, or are you sitting in the fixed mindset? But also it's important to note as well, having a false growth mindset. So saying that we have a growth mindset when you don't really have, or you don't really understand what it is. It's in a false sense that nobody has a growth mindset in everything that we do all of the time. We really are mixed in how we actually approach something. So something could be really challenging and outside of your comfort zone. That could trigger us off and kind of set us back to put us into that fixed mindset. Or you might encounter someone who's much better than you or a better player, or you feel that you might feel intimidated, and you might say, oh, that person has their brilliant ability, but I don't have it. So have a think. When are you in that growth mindset, or when are you in that fixed mindset, and what are the particular triggers? So look for the fixed mindset triggers and understand that you're falling into that fixed mindset perspective. Another thing that Carol Dweck, the main researcher in this particular area says they've done a lot of research. A lot of this is based in academics and educational psychology, where where they actually wrote on children's exams, not yet, as opposed to actually giving them a grade. Okay. And then for other children, they actually gave them grades, and they were able to compare the two groups. And they found that the children who had got the not yet were the ones, when they went on to test it further, had developed further, put in more effort, and were much more motivated to achieve. So using the power of yet is incredibly important. So punctuating your sentence, I'm not able to do this yet. I haven't figured out the strategy to manage it yet. I can't seem to be able to kick the ball, from that particular angle yet. So punctuating your sentences with yet is very, very important. We all just haven't learned to do these certain things yet, or just yet. So the brain is like a muscle. If you exercise it, it gets denser, and through repeated practice, these actual neurons and connections get stronger. an insulation called myelin builds up along the axon, the tube that connects the neuron to neurons. And that's how we can actually develop and grow and practice growth mindset. We only found out about brain plasticity in the 90s. Before that, we thought your brain was just kind of fixed and that you had what you had and that we couldn't change anything. But that's been completely blown out of the water now. It's never too late, or we're never too old to learn how to use and implement and shift our own mindsets. More myelin means that the signal travels through the neurons faster. So with practice and kind of practicing again, asking ourselves what type of mindset and how are we actually approaching this situation will allow us to develop those neurons. The more practice you get, the stronger your brain will actually become, and the more automatic your thinking is going to feel when you're actually in those challenging situations. So as long as our brains are functioning properly, we can always learn new skills, we can always improve existing capabilities, and we can always develop new skills. Our brains actually grow as we age. It isn't something that's static. It isn't something that's fixed. So don't be afraid to challenge your thinking, your thoughts, and your mindsets, and think about your approach to certain things before you actually get into a challenging situation or you're coming to a big competition. What is your mindset like? Can you handle that? Can you think about it? Can you change it? Can you make sure that it's working for you, not against you? So just some basic, simple questions that could activate a growth mindset with yourself. Like, what can I learn from last season? What did I learn about maybe myself? And what did I learn as a player? What did I learn technically, tactically, physically, mentally, psychologically? What steps can I take to help me succeed? What do I need to do next? And like, if I'm going to succeed, what is the outcome, or what's the goal? What's the process? What's the journey? What am I actually after? What do I want to achieve? Can I identify that so I know, I suppose, the end point of what I want to do? Where can I get feedback? Who can help me along this journey? Who can be honest and give me some critical feedback, develop myself, develop my skill, develop my coachability? If I had a plan to be successful at whatever I want to achieve, what would it actually look like? So actually start to think about the process, the performance. What would the plan actually look like? Articulating that in some way. When will I follow up on my plan now that I've articulated it or written it down? Simple things about reflections at the end of a day. What did I learn today? That's something I'd often do at the end of a day, a closing of something. What did I learn today? And it can be the simplest of things. It doesn't have to be anything major. Or what did I learn in college? What did I learn about my practice? What did I learn about an athlete today? Or what did I learn about myself today? What mistake did I make today that's taught me something? Again, that's the difference between failing and being a failure. We all make mistakes all the time because we're humans. We're humans first, person first, athlete, player second. What did I try hard at today? So what is your signature strength? What did you put some effort and intensity, direction and intensity of effort in today to get right for yourself? What habits must I develop to continue the gains I've actually achieved? Thinking again, useful and helpful thoughts. So there's a 4-step process to change your mindset. And again, the first step, like I said to you, is the awareness of, are you switching between your mindset? So can you actually hear your fixed mindset voice? What does that sound like? What's the general statement that you say to yourself that actually cuts you off and sets you into that fixed mindset place? And recognize now when you're in that reflection piece, you have a choice about your approach to something. You have a choice about how you feel and you think. Talk back to it with a growth mindset and take the growth mindset action. The power of not yet. So talk back to it. Challenge your thinking and your thoughts. That's something I do again with athletes in an applied setting. Like, what's your evidence for that thought? What's your evidence? Be your own barrister. Okay, so present the evidence for that. And then when you actually start to challenge it, okay, maybe you made a mistake there, but is that like, do you usually do that? Or maybe you didn't make the right decision at that particular piece or tactic that you're actually playing in the game. Does that usually happen? No. Is it true of you all at the time? Probably not. Is this a useful and helpful way to feel and think? Probably not. So take the growth mindset action. The key here is to shift out of the framework of the judgment, the fix, and to actually shift into that area of growth. So allowing yourself the time and space and challenge to actually get into that growth particular mindset. And accountability is the tie that holds the commitment to the results. So really accountability from, I suppose, from a football perspective is, are you doing everything that you said you're going to do to yourself 100% of the time when even nobody's looking or nobody is recording what you're doing? So holding yourself accountable is really, really important. And knowing that you did your best and you gave your best. And that's not to say there isn't time, like I said, the self-care piece, the time for recharge, the time for reflection, the time for absolute just time out and do nothing that has nothing to do with football. But holding yourself accountable by the times when you're there and it is football related, or it's nutrition, or it's sleep, all of the things that you've control over. So focus on what you can control and hold yourself accountable to those particular actions. So look, there's some of the things that we've talked about tonight about that we put in to our actual growth mindset toolbox and some basic skills and strategies that are in there. So I did speak about anticipating problems. So the what if scenario, what if certain things happen, and planning your responses and your reactions to those things is incredibly important. There will always be problems. So let's not approach it like we're just going to hope for the best and make it up on the day. What are the problems that are going to happen? Or what are the barriers that are most likely to happen? What are we going to do about it if that actually does happen and what's occur? One thing if you take away from tonight then, your cup of tea, your thinking affects your emotions, which affects your actions, but your actions also affect your emotions, which affect your thinking. So flip it. Your 4Ds, your daily decisions determine your destiny. It's an accumulation of all the small things that will help you grow to the big goal or the big process or the big performance piece that you're aiming for at the end. Again, practical positive self-talk, optimism with the dog lead. It doesn't have to be constant positivity, because constant positivity, like I said, is going to sound disingenuous to some people in their own minds. Okay, it has to be just more practical or more neutral. And the more practical and more neutral you are, the more likely you are to move into that positive self-talk type space. So again, useful and helpful thought. Asking yourself, is this a useful or helpful thought? Look, you might need some additional support to kind of navigate this system. So seek out support is really important. And we can't look after anybody else in our life or our teammates or anyone else in our team or in our own little bubble if we're not looking after ourselves. You see that in the back of all the flights that you go on. Put on your own oxygen mask first, okay, which is really important. So that kind of seek out support and self-care piece is really important. Do not neglect that, because it is a thing that I see with athletes and players a lot, that they feel that more and more and more is better. And we know that isn't always the way. Just go for it. Okay, just have a go and see what happens. And again, reframe it. There's a big difference between maybe you will fail, but you're not a failure. So even saying that and reframing the language of how you talk to yourself and how you describe that particular experience. Maybe you just got unlucky and it didn't work out for you. Or maybe if you do it, it will work for you, but you'll have no regrets. So sometimes we just have to absolutely go for it and see what happens and be okay with whatever happens, and think about, well, if this happens, I'll be okay. But if this scenario happens, I'll be brilliant. Control the controllables, focus on those things within that green circle and choose that growth mindset. The self-care and the recharge piece is really important. Reframe any kind of barriers, setbacks as challenges. Really don't put them into that threat space where we feel maybe I'm personally threatened, or my player identity is threatened, or I don't feel like I'm not able to do it. It's just a challenge. Let's see how you get on at this particular challenge, and can you move through the levels of that particular challenge. And again, picking your battles is really important. Sometimes we just have to laugh at the small frustrations or the small things that happen along the way. So being that effective problem solver is really important. So giving your energy to the things that you can control, and then rolling with some of the other things. There's some things that are so like, I cannot control it. What am I going to do? I'll just roll with it. Because if I constantly keep giving it thought, and I constantly keep giving it energy, there's an energy cost to all of those things. So maybe when you get to a performance perspective, you feel fatigued, but you haven't even played. Or again, it's difficult to manage your emotions, like I said, when you feel tired as well, or fatigued, or you're mentally kind of burnt out or very tired. Okay, so these are all just some simple skills and simple tools that I hope that you've been able to put into your mental skills and mindset toolbox and take away messages from today. So just to wrap it up for you, and that I'd love to hear your questions or thoughts or whatever any queries you have, throw them out, put them in the chat box there. So look, the self-talk, we've gone over that. So thinking useful and helpful, the pursuit of excellence. So pursuing excellence and what that looks like. So be boring, be basic, but that's okay. Let's get the fundamentals right, and how to grow your own mindset, the power of not yet. So I suppose foster and develop that growth mindset, and choose the growth mindset and the challenges you actually face. And all of these are going into your toolbox. And you mightn't use all of these at all the time. And some of you may connect with some of the skills differently that I've touched on tonight. But it's important to know that you have some of these skills in your toolbox, or you need to practice them now that you've awareness about them, and actually know and try them and test them in the challenging situations that you actually face. Okay, and that's a wrap. Thanks a million to everybody, and thanks a million for the invitation here to speak with you tonight. And I'd love to hear any questions or queries or thoughts, or throw them out.
Yeah, we have some coming in here, and that was brilliant. I'd say on behalf of Ladies Football, thank you very much. I've got my pen and paper beside me here, taking notes for my own benefit. Just really enjoyed it. And I suppose the one thing from me was, can't even believe how many times we think things during the day, how many thoughts we have. So it's really important, I think, as an athlete, to try and get a grasp on them thoughts and processes. So a wee question in here: how age appropriate are these tools? I.e., are they exclusively for adults, adolescents, or children, or does it vary? And what you can use depending on the age of person?
Yeah, I like, you could definitely use some of the growth mindset things, about even the language that you use when you're speaking to children, about challenge, effort, things that they actually control. So you're not kind of, I suppose, like the way presenting it the way that I did with you guys tonight, but I think you can definitely frame up certain situations, and also again thinking about how they attribute their success. So what does success look like, or to an actual child, so they feel like they've done something, they've achieved something from that particular session, and making sure that they feel successful but challenged in what they're doing as well. So it's more probably about, from a coaching perspective, to implement these with the children. It's not actually educating them about growth and fixed mindset, but we set things up for them as a challenge and allow them to achieve and feel success in what they're actually doing. I think we could actually bring in the kind of the not yet stuff. You're doing brilliant, good effort, not there yet, keep going. Just the way we deliver the feedback and the style of feedback is really important.
The next question probably follows on that. Somebody has asked, how can you start this kind of thinking with underage players, to start giving them these skills early on? So I think, sort of from a coaching perspective, how could they start getting their athletes, or in this case their players, to start thinking maybe even on themselves? Have you any tips on basically starting a conversation, maybe on self-talk or positive thinking or anything like that?
Yeah, and it's still, I think, in a language that they connect to an age appropriate way that would suit that particular. You can definitely introduce these things kind of to like pre-teens, young teens, and the best person to deliver all these things actually is the coach. The person who's the most contact, who knows the individuals, so it's probably keeping things really simple, really short, delivering it in a manner that they will connect it, using examples that they will actually connect it, and maybe even saying or expressing things. Yeah, I know this is a big, sharing your own experiences as a coach. I know this is a challenge for us. I feel nervous too sometimes, and this is how I manage things. So using a vicarious experience, so giving them examples of people or other players that they can actually connect to as well. Role models have talked about certain things, sharing those stories. Obviously at an age appropriate, the things that we want them to know about, or what they want to handle. That other players, big players, also get nervous. This is some of the things they use to manage their self-talk. Or ask a player before you. This is something I suppose, this is a kind of simple tool that I use now. Sometimes coaches are quick to jump in and tell them what they saw or what they need to do. Ask the player, what were you feeling there? Tell me what you were thinking there. So ask them, or what do you think happened there? Or why did you win this? Or why did we lose? So ask them and you get an insight straight away. You'll get the fixed mindset. You might get the negative statements, blah, blah, blah. And then you get to challenge it with them. obviously, you know, I'm talking again age appropriate in a context that they can to relate to as well. But ask them first instead of jumping in to kind of tell them what we think, and then obviously that's going to bias a player's response and the way they speak, and that'll be for kids and that'll be for adults.
So someone's just come in here with this one as well, and never an easy question. If you're got a free taker who has missed the first 1 or 2 free kicks, have you any tips or tricks that you can use with them to help them sort of reset their minds and go on to the next tip? I suppose would that be more of the self-talk?
Yeah, it would be, and kind of really just like really kind of trying to identify, and this is the identity piece as well, that they're not their free kicks, they're not their performance, that they, you know, using examples of players who miss but are able to actually reset and refocus. That's someone that's kind of multifaceted. That's someone who probably needs to really nail their own pre-performance routine, the way they actually take the frees, that type of thing. And like, there's no kid or there's no player goes out to miss anything. So reassuring them that, look, it's okay, but we go again, reset, refocus. But they may need, that person might need a little bit of direction or support to actually develop some specific strategies for them, whether it's a cue word, whether it's looking at a dot on their hand, something external to actually trigger that prompt to actually change their thinking and their thoughts internally. So that's a little bit more detailed for what you need. But again, giving reassurance, telling them that it's going to be okay. And also, what is the strategy that you using to become into the present moment? So the things like their breathing is important, their trigger words, their mantras, that type of stuff. So that does need to be a little bit more bespoke. That's a little bit more of a complex question to give over and answer over this forum.
Can you suggest, I'm not sure if you can help with this one, Ciara, but can you suggest a group-based activity to get girls talking, thinking about their mindset? Currently coaching under 15 girls and finding a tricky age that can filter through the group. Is it just a handful showing up with negativity energy?
Yeah, and some of these things might be actually good. I often find females are a little bit more receptive to these types of things than males are generally, and they're more interested in talking. So setting time aside to do these things and challenge these things, and actually giving it, not just tagging it maybe at the end of an actual training session, that we actually have a session that's going to talk about our mindsets, our coachability, the energy that we bring, and how infectious energy actually is. So why bring a negative energy? That's really contagious, particularly in a team or in a dressing room, that type of thing. So bringing their own, giving them some kind of basic psychology, basic education, which is the foundations of everything, that understanding why we do something and why we behave in a certain way allows us to change our behavior. So, and maybe allowing a little bit of group work or a forum for that type of age group, they would be clued in enough and articulated enough to actually maybe take a session for 20 minutes, a half an hour, that is directly related to mindsets, that type of thing.
Brilliant, Ciara. I think that's us for this evening. There doesn't seem to be too much more coming in there. I think even just listening to you, my takeaway message for me personally from tonight would be the fact that the thinking, the emotions and the actions. I just think that's really powerful. And that's one thing I definitely learned from this evening. So really it was super. Some great lessons there. And I know we were just touching base on a lot of the stuff, and there's loads of different material out there if anybody wants to move on and get a bit more information. But it's brilliant to have you here and to listen to that experience. So thanks very much again from all of us at Ladies Football, and for everybody that tuned in. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and thanks and have a great evening.
Thanks a million, lads.